On today's video, we're going to go over how we process walleye fishing information. Hey there, outdoor YouTubers. It's Dave Knetter from Knetter's Practical Outdoors. And you know, like I said earlier, today's video we're going to talk about how we process walleye fishing information. Okay? The purpose of this video isn't to go over any one specific technique or any one particular, walleye bait or lure. The purpose of this video is to kind of talk about maybe being a little bit more open-minded to how we consume and how we apply walleye fishing information to our own specific fishing situations. Now, I referred to walleye fishing because walleye fishing is what I've tried to learn the most about over the years, but the ideas we're going to talk about would apply to just about any type of fishing. Now, let me explain what I mean by how we process walleye fishing information. We get our walleye fishing information in a variety of ways, right? Books, magazines, videos, seminars, the guy at the bait shop, our buddies, internet chat rooms. There's all sorts of ways that we gather walleye fishing information. And also, don't forget your own personal fishing experience. Okay, that's one of the most important ways to gather walleye fishing information. But I think sometimes we don't apply that information to our own personal fishing situations as well as we could. Because there's no absolutes in fishing, right? You could be reading an article written by some tournament pro, and that tournament pro says, do this, this, and this, and you'll catch walleyes. But that formula might not be right for your personal fishing situation. Because that tournament pro that writes the article in the magazine, or that fishing guide that does a video, they can't account for every single little variable that fishing brings us. That's why sometimes you kind of need to add in your own fishing experience, your own fishing instinct, or your own fishing common sense to kind of fill in those gaps. I know about like 25-ish years ago, I wanted to learn a lot about fishing with bottom bouncers and spinners. I had never really fished with them, and I thought, hey, I really want to add that to my walleye fishing repertoire. Okay, so I went ahead and I read the magazine articles and I watched some of the videos. So I went out that summer and I started experimenting fishing with bottom bouncers and spinners. And I was doing everything the videos and the magazines were saying to do. I'm trolling along. I'd keep my line at a 45-degree angle. All right. I'd periodically drop the rod back, let that bottom bouncer touch bottom, make sure the bottom was right there. But I wouldn't drag the bottom bouncer, right? Just check for it, pull it up, go along. And I was fishing lakes, and I was fishing areas of these lakes where I had caught walleyes before. But, I kind of had mixed results. I really wasn't catching as many fish as I thought I should have been. But after a while, I came to realize I was probably spending way too much time fishing in too shallow a water. Okay? Way too much time fishing in, say, less than 15 feet of water. Because if you can imagine, you're going along, and if that line is at a 45-degree angle, you're trolling along, and say you're in 10 feet of water, well, that bottom bouncer and spinner are not very far back behind the boat. And I know a lot of you guys are saying, you can catch walleyes on bottom bouncers in shallow water. You can catch walleyes on bottom bouncers even if the setup's really close to the boat. It's not a problem. But a lot of the lakes that I fish are pretty darn clear, okay? And a lot of the lakes I was fishing were also quite small. And I mentioned that they were small in size because on a regular day-to-day basis, you wouldn't have a whole lot of chop on the surface. So a lot of these lakes were pretty unforgiving when it came to, spooking fish with your boat. And really, my fishing experience on those lakes and my fishing instinct, my fishing common sense, really probably should have told me right away that I was fishing those rigs too shallow water. They were too close to the boat. Even though I was trolling with an electric motor, I'm going along and I'm probably spooking fish off to the sides, and they're not even seeing the rig when it comes by. So what I needed to do is I needed to tweak how I use bottom bouncers. Okay, when I was fishing these clear water lakes, especially when it was flat calm, if I was going to use a bottom bouncer, it needed to be in a little bit deeper water, something over 15 feet. Or I needed to run them out to the sides of the boat with planer boards. Or I needed to make sure there was a good chop on the water if I was going to use them. Or it was real low light conditions, that sort of thing. And when I tweaked things up a little bit, then I began to have pretty good success using bottom bouncers and spinners. You know, another thing I remember, from back 25, 28 years ago, reading these articles and watching these videos, when guys would talk about fishing with spinners, right, spinners and crawlers, a recurring theme was how important it was to string that crawler behind that spinner so it was nice and straight. Okay? A lot of really smart fishermen were pretty adamant about that you needed to get that crawler on there nice and straight. They'd say if you kind of get it on there canked or crooked, it'll just sit behind that spinner and spin, and that was considered no good. Well, sometime between back then and now, these slow death hooks kind of came on the scene. Okay? Well, what's a slow death hook? Well, for those of you that don't know, it's just kind of a hook that's got kind of a kank to it, or kind of a bend in it. And a lot of guys are running these slow death hooks behind their spinners now. Okay? Well, what does that do? Okay? Well, when you thread that crawler on that slow death hook, it puts a little bend in it. Alright? What does that bend do? Well, it actually makes it deflect, shake, twist, turn behind the spinner. Sometimes it even makes it spin. Okay? Well, that kind of seems like the opposite of what some guys were saying 25, 28 years ago. Okay? And I'm pretty sure a lot of guys that were saying that 25, 28 years ago are probably running slow death hooks today. Well, which theory is right? Should that crawler be dead straight behind that spinner and just kind of go through the water nice and straight? Or, is it okay for it to twist, turn a little bit, deflect as it's going through the water? Well, I don't think either one's wrong, right? And I do understand the theory behind, if you had like a big kind of loop in that crawler and it's running through the water and it's just spinning like a propeller, I can see where that wouldn't be ideal. But yeah, to give that crawler a little twist, a little turn, a little deflection and movement as it's behind that spinner, to me, I think that's a good thing. I do like running slow death hooks on my spinners. Okay, and I also, sometimes instead of using a spinner with a crawler, I'll actually use a flatfish. And I kind of make up these flatfish rigs and I put a slow death hook behind those, okay, and I fish with those. And, if you're interested in that at all, I did do a whole other video on that, on these flatfish and the slow death hook. And I'll leave a link below if you want to check that video out, okay? But I do like using the slow death hooks. I think that little shake, that little deflection, can attract fish. Well, the point of all this is just to be a little bit open-minded, and to experiment for yourself a little bit, because I can't help but wonder, hey, 25, 28 years ago, if some of those guys would have been putting a little bend in that crawler and it would have been back there shimmying and shaking a little bit more, heck, maybe they would have got bit a little bit more, right? Another thing that's kind of new since back then and today is the internet. Okay, and that's maybe changed how we consume our walleye fishing information a little bit, right? If you were watching a walleye video, say 30 years ago, that walleye video was probably made by a pretty reputable source. But now, with the internet and YouTube and things like that, you guys are watching walleye videos sometimes made by guys like me. Now, I do try to add some video and pictures of fish that I've caught or fish that friends and family members have caught with me, to kind of give the stuff I'm talking about a little validation. But I also know that a lot of you viewers out there are catching more and bigger walleyes than I ever will, okay? I read your comments. Some of you guys are out there fishing the Columbia River, the Detroit River, Saginaw Bay, Lake Erie, those are all places where, there can be some awfully good walleye fishing at times, right? And I know some of you guys are out there killing it. But that's one of the cool things about the internet, that we can all kind of exchange this information. It's not like, say, back 30 years ago where you just had the fishing guides and the pros teaching the rest of us. Now, we can all kind of bring something to the table. Maybe there's this guy out there, and maybe he's not the most versatile fisherman, but he does this one thing on this one lake, and he catches a lot of walleyes doing it. And then that guy makes a video of it. He puts it out on YouTube. So now the rest of us, can add that one thing to our walleye fishing repertoire, and it makes us all better fishermen because of it. Now, having said all that, I do think we need to be a little bit cautious about how we consume fishing information off of the internet. Especially when we're getting that fishing information from like the local fishing chat rooms. Now, about 4 years ago, I wrote kind of a humorous article on this very subject, okay? And I was fortunate enough to get that article published in Fisherman magazine, all right? And I just want to read the first couple lines of that article to you guys. Okay. The article was called The Liar's Club. All right. If a lie falls from a fisherman's mouth and there is no truthful fisherman around to hear it, does it make a sound? Is there even such thing as a truthful fisherman? If a lie is only heard by other fishermen, is it really even a lie at all? Well, the point of all this is fishermen are known to be notorious liars, right? So you may have to sift through information sometimes, especially when that information comes from like a local fishing internet chat room. Now, I know this is going to sound a little weird, but sometimes I don't even think we're processing information correctly from our own fishing experiences. Like, here's an example, and I've had a lot of fishing conversations similar to this example, okay? You're at the boat landing, you run into two of your buddies, they're just coming off the lake, okay? And of course you ask them, hey, how was fishing? And they're like, oh, it was pretty good, we got 5 keeper walleyes. It's like, oh, great. And these are your buddies, so you're allowed to keep asking questions. So the next thing you ask is, how'd you catch them? They're like, oh, it was easy. We were just long line trolling F11 Rapalas straight off the back of the boat in 10 feet of water. You're like, oh, hey, cool, thanks for that information. Then the one buddy adds in, yeah, but so-and-so here, he caught all the fish because he had the right color Rapala. It's like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, he had the bleeding hot olive colored F11 and I just had this silver and black and I didn't catch any of the fish. So if you're going to go out there and try it, you better have that bleeding hot olive color, which is this. Okay, that's just an example. So that's some real good fishing information you just got, right? Okay. But then you get to talking to your buddies a little bit more, and you're asking them, oh, well, how much line were you letting out behind the boat? They're like, oh, we just had spinning gear, probably about a cast and a half or so. It's like, okay, well, right away I'm thinking they probably weren't letting the same amount of line out, okay? And then you're like, hey, did you add any weight, to your line? Did you pitch a split shot on? They're like, oh yeah, and they both kind of point to their rods to the split shot, kind of give you a little size reference to what they were doing. And you're looking at the split shot, and you could tell just by looking at it, it's not even the same size split shot between the two fishermen. And then you're also kind of looking at their fishing setups, and you can kind of tell one of them's fishing with something like 8-pound test fire line, and it looks like the other rod's got like 12-pound test mono on it. Now, I think some of you guys see where I'm going with this, okay? Even though both your buddies were fishing with F11 Rapalas, albeit different colors, but they're both F11s, okay? There's a really good chance they weren't letting the same amount of line out, okay? You can see just from the split shots that they showed you on their rigs, they're different sizes, so they're adding different weight to the setups. And you can see they have, pretty different lines, One looks like an 8-pound fire line, one looks like a 12-pound test mono. That line diameter is going to be very different between the two setups, okay? All three of those factors are going to affect how deep these Rapalas go in the water column, okay? With all those variables, there's a good chance, in this scenario, that those Rapalas might have been swimming 3, 4, 5 feet different in depth, okay? And maybe that was the reason that one of them was getting bit and the other wasn't. maybe one of them, you know, it just so happened it was the one with the bleeding hot olive color. Maybe this lure was swimming at the right depth, and that's why it was getting bit. And it really wasn't so much about the color. Just a quick little sidebar here, as long as we're talking about Rapalas. All right. Now, I think a lot of you know that Rapala is a Finnish company. Okay. All right. It's a Finnish lure making company. Well, about 2 years ago, I met this gentleman from Finland, and we got to talking, and I asked him, hey, how do you pronounce Rapala? Okay. And he's like, oh, yeah, it's Rapala. I was like, okay, so it's Rapala? He's like, oh, yeah, it's Rapala. And I was like, okay, Rapala. And so it's more of a U sound, okay? Rup, like the old snowmobiles, rup. Well, you kind of fast forward just to a few months ago, and I met 3 more gentlemen from Finland, okay? And I had to ask them the same question, right? You know, so I'm like, hey guys, how do you pronounce Rapala? You know, the lure making company Rapala. And they're like, oh yes, yeah, Rapala. And again, they kind of had that U sound, Rapala. Okay, so it's like, oh, all right, so it's Rapala? And they're like, yes, Rapala. I was like, all right. I said, it's not Rapala? And all 3 of them just laughed at me. All 3 of them were like, oh, no, Rapala. And they got a pretty good kick out of that. Okay, so the conclusion I came to is the correct pronunciation is Rapala. Okay, Rapala is pretty close, but if you say Rapala in front of the Finns, they're just going to laugh at you. Now, you don't get this information from just any channel, okay? Remember that. So now you can go out and you can be the smartest one of your fishing buddies for the day by telling them how the correct pronunciation of Rapala is actually Rapala, okay? And you can tell them that Knetter's Practical Outdoors said so. You know, another source of fishing information that we need to process correctly is the information that we get from the packages of some of the fishing products that we buy, okay? Like this is a Berkley Gulp product, and it says right on the package that it outfishes live bait. Okay, that's a pretty bold statement, right? Okay, and then, you know, here's another Berkley Gulp product, and it actually says right on there that it outfishes all other bait, which is another very bold statement, okay? Well, I've heard some professional fishermen make the same statements about these same products, that, you know, these Berkley Gulp products do outfish live bait, and these Berkley Gulp products do outfish all other bait. Okay, well, are these statements true? Well, in my opinion, yes, those statements are true. Sometimes, okay? You guys want to know about another bait that'll outfish live bait sometimes? This green thunder stick. This'll outfish live bait sometimes. You want to know another thing that outfishes live bait sometimes? This yellow Daredevil spoon. Okay. Another one is the F11 Rapala. Another one is a Hottentot. I think you guys kind of see the point I'm trying to make. If you put it in perspective, it's maybe not that outrageous to make the claim that something outfishes live bait. Sometimes, okay? But I think the marketing crew at Berkley didn't think it would be a good idea to add sometimes to the end of those statements. Because remember, there's no absolutes in fishing, right? Those bold statements, outfishes live bait, outfishes all other bait. That's not the whole story, right? That's not the whole truth, okay? You know, well, why do I say that? Well, one of the reasons I say that is my own fishing experience has told me that that's not the truth all the time, okay? Another thing that tells me that is bait shops still sell live bait, okay? If there was a soft plastics line out there that truly outfished live bait under all circumstances, I don't think any of us would be buying live bait anymore, right? Because, I mean, let's face it, live bait is a hassle, right? Little package like this, that's easy, right? Just grab one of these and go. If these truly outfished live bait under all circumstances, I don't think we'd be buying live bait anymore. Now, I would have no problem taking a jig like this one and taking some gulp leeches, putting one of these gulp leeches on the back of this jig and going out and trying to jig up some walleyes. I would have no issues with that. In fact, I think under a lot of circumstances, that gulp leech on the back of that jig would work just as good as a real live leech on the back of that jig. Now, I would not say the same thing if I was going to be taking leeches and going out slip bobber fishing. Okay? I would really want to have good live leeches if I was going to be out slip bobber fishing for walleyes. I would not feel nearly as confident if I had to use gulp leeches instead of live leeches. And you know, the same thing goes for when I'm pulling crawlers and spinners. Okay? I do like to have a real crawler behind my spinners. Alright? And same thing for the flatfish, like I mentioned earlier. You know, when I'm pulling a crawler behind a flatfish, I do like to have a real crawler. I don't feel like, you know, there's a substitute for the real thing. Alright? Now, having said that, every once in a while you'll find yourself in a situation where small fish are picking that crawler right off the hook. Then I might want to go with like a gulp product, you know, like a gulp night crawler. They stay on the hook a little bit better. You know, they'll kind of fend off some of those little fish from picking them off. And, you know, I have caught walleyes, you know, pulling these gulp products behind spinners and the flatfish. They do work. I just don't think they work quite as good as the real deal. Okay, guys. Well, there's a few examples of how we can process our walleye fishing information, you know, maybe a little bit better. You want to take that information that you get from other fishermen, right? The information you get from the pros, the information you get from the guides, the information that you get from the seminars, the videos, the magazines. Take that information, okay, and then combine it with your own fishing experience, all right? Your own fishing instincts, your own fishing common sense. Put all those things together, and chances are you're probably going to be able to come up with the best formula for that particular day of fishing or your particular fishing situation. All right? And also, guys, remember to hunt, fish, laugh, repeat. This is Dave Knetter from Knetter's Practical Outdoors. Hey, thanks for watching and God bless.